Have you ever spent your whole life sacrificing for your children, only to realize one day you become nothing more than an unpaid housekeeper in your own family? Mr. Martin, a 72-year-old father, gave everything he had, his money, energy, and health, to build a better future for his children. He paid for their homes, helped them buy cars, cared for his grandkids, and even retired early to support them. But when illness and loneliness hit in his later years, his two sons were nowhere to be found. This story isn't rare, and it just might be a wake-up call for you. In his younger years, Mr. Martin worked long hours, saved every penny, and poured his heart into his family. He believed that selfless love would be returned. But as the years passed, all he got in return during times of sickness were a few cold phone calls. Family love, can it truly last if it only flows one way? This isn't just Mr. Martin's pain. It's a reality that many parents face. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to rethink what we give and what we deserve in return. Parental love is one of the only kinds of love in this world that asks for nothing in return, but it's also one of the easiest to take for granted. At 72 years old, Mr. Martin sat quietly in his modest living room, gazing out the window as the afternoon sun filtered gently through the trees. His eyes weren't exactly sad, but there was depth in them, a kind of quiet, worn-down wisdom. Every wrinkle on his face seemed to tell a story of years spent sacrificing, giving, and waiting. He had been a devoted father, a responsible husband, and a hard-working employee for nearly 40 years. His life was driven by one simple belief: as long as my children are happy, I can endure anything. And endure he did. When his eldest son wanted to marry but couldn't afford a home, Mr. Martin drained his savings to cover the down payment. When his youngest struggled to find a stable job, Mr. Martin paid for him to return to school and helped cover his living expenses. And when the grandchildren arrived, both Mr. and Mrs. Martin became full-time caregivers, putting their own retirement plans on hold so their children could work and get ahead. They didn't complain. They didn't expect anything in return, except maybe a call now and then, a visit during the holidays, or a little sign that they were still appreciated. But over time, those little gestures stopped coming. When Mr. Martin was hospitalized with severe joint pain, his sons were too busy to visit. A quick phone call, a polite, "Hope you feel better," and then nothing. When he called later just to talk, no one picked up. Holidays became painfully quiet. The house that once buzzed with energy now echoed with silence, interrupted only by the sound of two aging parents preparing dinner alone. Mr. Martin didn't get angry. He didn't lash out. But something inside him shifted. For the first time, he asked himself a question that had been buried under decades of sacrifice. Was it worth it? Had he given too much and forgotten to hold on to something for himself? And so he changed. He stopped sending money every time his sons texted, "Dad, can you help me out?" He no longer rushed to tidy up the house in anticipation of a visit that might never come. Instead, he and his wife enrolled in a piano class, started taking morning walks, and even took short weekend trips using the money they once planned to pass down. For the first time in his life, Mr. Martin felt something he hadn't known he was missing: freedom, peace. He didn't stop loving his children, but he finally realized that love doesn't have to mean endless sacrifice. As parents, they still had the right to live for themselves, to protect their health, their finances, and their emotional well-being as they grew older. If you're in your 50s, 60s, or beyond, maybe you see yourself in Mr. Martin's story. Maybe you spent a lifetime giving, worrying, and putting your needs last. But now, maybe it's time to ask, am I truly happy? Growing older shouldn't feel like fading away. It should be a new chapter, one where you finally give yourself the same care you've given everyone else. And if someone ever asked Mr. Martin if he regrets giving so much to his kids, I imagine he'd smile gently and say, "No, I just wish I had learned to love them, without forgetting to love myself too." Mr. and Mrs. Martin were once considered the pride of their neighborhood. Both had spent their careers working in public service, respectable, disciplined, and devoted to their family. After decades of hard work, they retired with a combined pension of over $1,400 a month, enough to live comfortably without financial worry. To outsiders, they were the picture of a happy retirement. Financially stable, adult children with good jobs, and a house that had seen generations grow. But what most people didn't see behind the quiet walls of their home was a lingering sadness, and a story that might sound painfully familiar to many. Throughout their lives, Mr. and Mrs. Martin gave everything they had to their children. When their eldest son got married, they paid the down payment on his first home. When their youngest struggled to find a job after college, they funded a second degree. When grandchildren came along, Mrs. Martin retired early to babysit full-time, while Mr. Martin turned down extra work opportunities to help at home. They believed that as long as their children were doing well, any sacrifice was worth it. But as the years passed, the calls stopped coming regularly. Holidays were no longer family celebrations. They were short, formal visits, often squeezed into busy schedules. The warmth of the past faded into silence. One winter, when Mrs. Martin needed surgery due to a health condition, Mr. Martin called their eldest son, asking if he'd come home to help. The response was blunt. "Dad, you both have money. Just hire someone. I'm really swamped with work." There were no follow-up calls, no visits, just silence. Mr. Martin didn't get angry, but he never forgot that moment. It was the first time he truly felt that he was no longer a father in their eyes, but more like a backup bank account. That moment changed everything. He and his wife made a quiet but powerful decision. No more financial support for their children. No more just this once wire transfers. No more helping with house upgrades or car repairs. No more waiting by the phone, hoping for a call that only came when someone needed something. They began saving their money for themselves, for future medical care, for small joys in life, and most of all, for the peace of mind that comes with independence. "We don't hate our children," Mr. Martin said, "but we can't keep sacrificing in silence either. If old age is just about waiting for your kids to remember you, it's no different than all those working years, constantly giving, never receiving. Now it's time for us to live for ourselves." And live they did. Their days became simpler, but more fulfilling. They started grocery shopping together again, taking morning walks, reading books in the park, and planning little weekend getaways. Their home, while quieter, no longer felt heavy with sadness, because they finally understood a truth that many ignore. You can't build your happiness around the hope that others will be grateful. You have to build it from the love you give yourself. Their story is not one of bitterness, but of awakening. It's a reminder that while family is important, so is self-respect, that setting boundaries is not cold, it's necessary, and that a dignified retirement is not about how much money you pass on, but how peacefully and meaningfully you live the years you've earned. Mr. Martin now lives with more ease than ever, and if you were to ask him if he regrets helping his children so much, he'd probably smile and say, "Not at all, but I wish I'd realized sooner that giving everything doesn't mean giving up who you are." Mr. and Mrs. Martin no longer built their later years around a vague hope that their children would someday understand all they had done for them. Instead, they created the stage of life on a new foundation, one that was firm, clear, and grounded in self-respect. Help your children within your means, but never sacrifice yourself completely. After a lifetime of giving, of living for others, and quietly enduring disappointment when their children grew distant, they realized something that too many parents learned too late. Parental love, while deep and unconditional, must still have boundaries. Without those boundaries, it risks becoming either a burden or something taken entirely for granted. Mr. Martin stopped reaching for his wallet every time a text message popped up asking for help. He started saying no, not out of bitterness, but because he'd come to a difficult truth. When you give endlessly, people eventually assume it's your job. What once felt like love begins to look like obligation. And love, when it flows only one way, can drain the soul of the person constantly giving. Some of their neighbors questioned their decision. "You're retired," they said. "What are you saving for? Isn't that money supposed to go to your kids?" What those neighbors didn't understand was that Mr. and Mrs. Martin had already given everything they had. Their youth was spent working long hours, saving, budgeting. Their energy was poured into building a life for their children. Their retirement years, meant to be enjoyed, were filled instead with babysitting grandkids and quietly covering bills. But when they got sick, when they truly needed support, their children weren't there. Not because they were too far away or unaware, but because they were too used to mom and dad handling everything. The Martins had taught their kids, through years of silent sacrifice, that giving was simply what parents do. And when the Martins stopped giving, what came back wasn't gratitude. It was frustration. Mr. Martin said something that stays with me. When you love someone so much that you forget to love yourself, you're the one who ends up hurt the most. That kind of love isn't noble, it's dangerous. Loving your kids doesn't mean bankrupting your body, your bank account, or your peace of mind. Saving part of your pension, taking time for yourself, protecting your emotional health, those are not selfish things. They are acts of self-care. They're ways of saying, I matter too. After they made that decision, their lives changed, not in flashy ways, but in subtle, beautiful ones. They started making time for things they once ignored. Long breakfasts together, peaceful walks in the morning sun, meditation classes at the local community center, weekend drives just for fun of it, without the constant pressure to please anyone but themselves. Every day became lighter. The home didn't echo with the noise of grandchildren anymore, but it also didn't echo with disappointment. Mr. Martin said his biggest regret wasn't what he had given. It was how long it took to realize that he had the right to hold on to something for himself. He hopes other people, especially those in their 50s, 60s, and beyond, learn from his journey. Giving to your children is one of life's greatest joys, but giving everything, down to your last ounce of energy or dollar, is not love. It's a slow kind of self-erasure. Stop pouring endlessly into others and start saving a little for your health, your happiness, your dignity. Because when life gets hard, as it always does, the part you kept for yourself is what will carry you through. And if your children truly love you, they won't let you give so much that you forget who you are. At over 70 years old, Mr. Martin still speaks with a calm, steady tone. He ends a story with a line that should stay with all of us. I never stopped loving my children, but now I've learned how to love them without forgetting to love myself. After deciding to hold on to their finances and live a more independent retirement, Mr. and Mrs. Martin began thinking about something they had never seriously considered before. What would it take for their retirement years to feel meaningful? Not just like passing time, with their health still relatively strong and their minds sharp. They knew they didn't want to spend their days sitting around waiting for time to pass. Mr. Martin once said, saving money is important, but if you're not doing anything with your life, the days start to feel like they're all the same. So they began exploring small jobs, not to make money, but to stay active, keep their minds sharp, and most importantly, to feel like they still had a purpose in the world. The first thing Mr. Martin tried was working a daytime shift as a community gate attendant in a small residential complex nearby. The work was light, just sitting at the gate, opening it for residents, and logging visitor names. Each day, he brought a book, a thermos of hot tea, and sometimes a few snacks to share with the evening shift. What brought him the most joy wasn't the modest paycheck. It was the interaction. Every day he got to talk to new people, hear about their lives, and feel like he was part of something, even if it was just a small part. Meanwhile, Mrs. Martin began working part-time for an elderly woman who lived alone. Twice a week, she came over to help with light cleaning and simple home-cooked meals. Sometimes they just sat down with a cup of tea and talked. Stories from the past, memories that nobody else seemed to have time for. That's when Mrs. Martin realized many seniors, just like her, weren't starving for food or money. What they lacked was companionship. Someone to talk to, someone to remind them they still mattered. Inspired by these experiences, the Martins began sharing their positive mindset with friends and neighbors. Some of them had once believed retirement was just about winding down and doing nothing. But after seeing how fulfilled the Martins had become, they started looking for their own ways to re-engage. One man set up a fruit stand near the local school. A retired music teacher began offering piano lessons to neighborhood kids. Another woman offered plant care services for small office buildings. None of them made much money, but that wasn't the point. They smiled more, felt less invisible, and most importantly, felt needed again. Mr. Martin said it best. We don't work because we need the money. We work because we need to feel useful. For him, Getting up in the morning, putting on a security uniform, and stepping out into the world, even just for a few hours, was a way of saying to himself, I still matter. They also began learning new skills. Mr. Martin picked up how to use his smartphone to read the news and stay connected. Mrs. Martin learned new recipes on YouTube and shared them with friends. They laughed more. They talked more. And in the quiet of the evening, sitting side by side, Mr. Martin would sometimes smile and say, we used to live for our kids. Now we live for joy. That's the message they hope to pass on to others who might be struggling to find meaning in their later years. Retirement doesn't have to mean stopping. It can mean starting to live for yourself finally and fully. Whether you choose to be a gate attendant, a part-time helper, a vendor, or simply someone who lends a hand to others, if it brings you joy and makes you feel alive, then that's the true beauty of growing older. Growing older isn't the end of the road. In fact, it can be the start of something new if we choose to live for ourselves. Through the story of Mr. and Mrs. Martin, I believe many of us can see a piece of ourselves. Parents who gave everything for their children, believing that unconditional love meant giving without limits. But the truth is, even love needs boundaries. And self-respect should never be the price we pay for connection. Mr. and Mrs. Martin didn't grow bitter. They simply realized that placing all your hopes in your children is a sure path to disappointment. Instead, they chose a different way, one of independence, intention, and joy. And that's the greatest lesson I've taken from their story. Hold on to your finances, your health, and your freedom, so you can live your later years in peace and dignity. If you're retired or preparing for it, remember this. You can still take on light work, contribute to your community, rediscover lost passions, and most importantly, find joy in every remaining day. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe for more inspiring and meaningful content, because you deserve to be heard, to be understood, and to never walk through the stage of life alone.